Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, October 24th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Wisconsin game is in 4 days. The game against Michigan in 32 days. We are talking about Michigan today, but we are not talking about the game. We are talking about all the off-field stuff going on around that Michigan program right now with the investigation by the NCAA into illegal scouting, maybe breaking some rules, bending some rules about in-person scouting, electronic scouting, all that kind of stuff. We talked about this with Tony Gerdeman late last week on, I think, Friday afternoon. Had a whole show about that. And then, boy, there has been some news that has broken since then. We thought, oh, boy, this is quite an eventful story, quite a day of news. And then as soon as we hit stop on that, a person at the center of the investigation, Connor Stalions, the Michigan staffer, he was suspended. Michigan AD Ward Manuel on Friday afternoon said, quote, Michigan Athletics suspended Connor Stalions today with pay pending the conclusion of the NCAA investigation. And then on Monday, new reporting from Pete Thamel of ESPN. And oh boy, there are some details. We're learning a lot more about how this allegedly all went down. And it seems like there are some other schools in the Big Ten who may have receipts, quite literally in some cases. Tony Gerdeman joins me. And Tony, if you're going to do some NCAA crimes, allegedly, it feels like buying tickets with your own credit card from the school's website is probably not the savviest way to go about doing that.
If you're trying to cover something up, sure, but what's to cover up here, Tom? It's just buying tickets for future opponents and sitting there and videotaping their calls and signals and things like that. I'm sure it's totally fine. But yeah, this is using your own name is something that I think maybe we gave them too much credit when we were initially talking about this, like how, clearly you're not going to use your own name. So what kind of deception do you use? Oh, no. Yeah, you do use your own name and you're very easy to track and the people in your seats are very easy to spot as they're holding up their cell phones, shooting the calls throughout the entire game.
Stallions is a Naval Academy graduate and retired as a captain in the United States Marine Corps. My younger brother went to the Naval Academy and retired as a captain in the United States Marine Corps. No relation, at least for between him and Stallions. However, I'm going to have some questions for my brother about the OPSEC training that they went through, because this seems a little sloppy if this is all as reported by Pete Thamel. I'm just going to read a few of just a little bit from that Thamel report in case you have missed it. Sources confirmed to ESPN that Stallions purchased tickets on both sides of the stadium across from each bench for Ohio State's game with Penn State on Saturday. Michigan plays both teams in upcoming weeks. According to sources, the tickets purchased by Stallions were not used on Saturday. Of course, his name emerged publicly in an ESPN story Friday. And then he was suspended with pay by Michigan, as I mentioned. 11 different tickets. There have been... it said none of the tickets that the 11 schools told ESPN about. So 11 schools have told ESPN about tickets purchased by Stallions. None of the tickets involved games with Michigan as an opponent. Per sources, the games involved either one or both of the teams that the Wolverines were playing later that season, according to sources. And I think we're getting a better sense, Tony, for how this might have happened. Because, when we talked on Friday, we were thinking, okay, so this guy potentially was driving around and going to these games. And then you saw these shots of him on the sideline with Jim Harbaugh during games. So obviously he's not driving around to do the other games. So how did this work? Sources indicated that Stallions forwarded tickets to at least 3 other individuals, with the ticket transfer showing up through the ticket data tracking. Those tickets were used by individuals other than Stallions to get into the game, including the one in the video the NCAA is expected to receive. And Tony, that video, that feels like that might be the thing that sort of ties this all together.
Yeah, I think through that video and some other evidence that will be shown. I know Ward Manuel said that they'll wait until the end of the NCAA investigation. I don't know that they're going to need to wait to the end of the investigation to finalize whatever their contract situation is with Stallions, because it seems like the evidence that has already mounted is enough to seal his fate with all of the receipts, the credit cards, why are you purchasing these tickets? Who are you giving them to? What are they doing with them? Oh, we can see what they're doing with those tickets. Where is that information then going? It's all, the math is pretty easy on this one. The difficult math is where does it go from here? But I would be surprised if by the end of the week, there isn't something more definite with the Stallions situation. And, the fact that he is at this point has this doing everything on his own, so to speak, is it's a tough one for me to believe, because not only is he doing it on his own, but others are doing it on their own. Like his seat sitters, I guess, if you will, like they're doing it on their own time as well. And everybody's a fantastic innocent in this, but there is a network, and I know there's going to be some brushback. I think Thamel initially called it a vast network, and has continued to label it that. And you'll see some Michigan people saying, it's just 3 guys. How's that a vast network?
That feels like not the specific term, the word vast. It doesn't feel like the term that this is all going to come down to. As far as the timing on this, Thamel's reporting said the NCAA is expected to receive video evidence this week of illegal technology used in scouting tied to tickets purchased by Stallions, according to sources. An opposing Big Ten school looked up in-stadium surveillance video from a game earlier this year. Sources said the person in the seat of the tickets purchased by Stallions held his smartphone up and appeared to film the home team sideline the entire game. So, if that feels like you'd have to really, really be stretching to not, if it is the person in the seat that was purchased by the staffer and that's what they're doing, it feels like it's not much of a stretch to draw a line there. And Stallions often purchased the tickets with his own credit card, according to sources. This is again from that ESPN Thamel report. The sources added the tickets at multiple venues were bought via the online retailers such as StubHub or SeatGeek. The ticket purchases fall into a seat location pattern somewhere around the 45-yard line and raised up enough for a clear view of the opposite sideline. I mean, this all feels, I think we have to wait for, this is all reporting, and sometimes reporting's not exactly right, and this is all according to sources. So you got to kind of let this play out again. But if this is as reported, this feels real straightforward. And then the only real question is, how much of, how direct of a line is there from Stallions to Jim Harbaugh, or Stallions to the coordinators, or Stallions to other people on Michigan staff? I mean, there were screenshots of his Venmo history going around, and there are other Michigan staffers who are friends with him on Venmo. So we don't know what that means yet. That I have not seen proof of any kind of direct transactions there. We'll have to see how that kind of all plays out. But this also feels, Tony, like, I know, the playbook here is to sort of say rogue, low-level staffer, no one else knew, no one else had any idea. When you've got screenshots of the guy standing right next to Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines, I don't know that makes him someone that you can just, I don't even know that guy's name. I have no, hey, listen, there's lots of people in the program. It feels like that's going to be a hard thing to dismiss unless you've made up your mind in advance that this definitely doesn't mean anything.
The plausible deniability, there may be some of that there, but ignoring, as you said, the fact that he's down on the sideline next to the coaches, and he's not the get back coach. I think maybe if they would have been wiser to make him the get back coach, then he's got a reason for being down there or something like that. But that's not his role. And so it's like, well, why is this guy down there? Why is he one of those people down there? And the thing with Pete Thamel, Ross Dellinger of SI, like, this isn't the end of the story. They're going to continue to dig, and they'll continue to find. And at some point, if there is a connection, like if there are real connections between Michigan telling him to do this and him going and doing it and then relaying it, I don't expect that to stay hidden. I would expect something like that to come out. And especially if Stallions gets sold out, like if he just gets sold down the river and it's like, well, he's done. And that's something that I think Michigan has to protect against, unless, of course, they're innocent, then they have nothing to, protect. But it's having that much disbelief that this was just on one person's station, like, I'm going to do this. And that Jim Harbaugh or none of his coaches ever asked, Connor, how do you know this? Like, how are you getting? And the answer the only plausible answer that would not be an NCAA violation is, Jim, I'm psychic. I'm psychic. And then it's like, okay, well, there's no there's no NCAA rules against being psychic, so just go with it. But to hire this guy for exactly, you look at it, the LinkedIn that we've talked about before, why did you hire him? And if the answer is, like, what is the answer? Because what you hired him for is seemingly exactly what you've gotten. And now you're saying, well, that's not what we asked him to do. That we have no knowledge of any of this. Like, what was the reason he was hired? What does he do? What was the value in having him? What made him so valuable that you hired him full time? What convinced you to hire him full time? What is the set of circumstances that led to that? Why did you feel you needed to make him a full-time part of the program? And of course, Jim Harbaugh, who has said he will be completely open and honest and forthcoming in this investigation, will not. I don't believe he will answer most of those questions truthfully, and or offer up some, just, I don't know if coach speak is the right word to use when talking to the NCAA, but I don't expect him to. I would not expect him to be forthcoming because I don't think he can be.
Well, I think what the defense is going to be here, and you've sort of seen this from folks online who are pointing to this, there's a little bit of an obfuscation of lots of people steal signs, and that is true. Stealing signs is part of the game of football. However, I'm going to just read from Pete Thamel again so that no one accuses me of bias. I'm just going to read directly from ESPN's Pete Thamel, who does not really have a dog in this fight as far as I'm aware in terms of a fanhood or alma mater or anything like that. Officials around the Big Ten are upset, according to sources, as allegations of this type of coordinated and orchestrated capturing of signals looms as distinctly different allegations than the gamesmanship of attempting to decode signals from across the sideline. In-game stealing is not prohibited under NCAA rules. So, that's something you've seen people sort of go, well, lots of people stole signs. I saw someone try and draw a comparison to Mike Leach leaving a fake play sheet out for Texas to find in the Red River shootout, 20 years ago. And I mean, the parallel drawn where there was, oh, sure, it's funny when Mike Leach does it, but when Michigan does it, it's serious. And it's like, no, in this, Michigan is Texas in this. Michigan is not, Michigan is Texas who is taking the information and doing something with acting upon the information that has been taken from the other sideline. That feels like a real intentional obfuscation of what's going on here. And, speaking of intentional obfuscations, this is just useful context, I think, in terms of how, why could this be serious? Because there is not a direct punishment listed for this type of allegation. If it is proven, there is not okay, you get this and this and this. This is again from Thamel. Michigan, which was already involved in an NCAA investigation for alleged illegal recruiting during the COVID-19 dead period, that you may have seen that reported as hamburgers, has pledged full cooperation with the latest investigation. There's no precedent to indicate what any potential punishment would be for Michigan or head coach Jim Harbaugh, as NCAA enforcement has never seen a case of this scope in sign stealing. And one other interesting point, this is from Dan Wetzel. He said Yahoo Sports reported that some teams potentially scouted were outside the Big Ten and were considered possible playoff opponents, so the number could grow from the 11 that were cited in the Thamel report. I think, I've seen a lot of people thinking, okay, this is going to, Michigan is going to get bowl banned this year, and so this whole season is going to go down the toilet. That is not Michigan fans saying that. I think that is hopeful fans from non-Michigan schools. I certainly don't. I mean, that would be pretty unprecedented. The NCAA just took 6 years to settle the Kansas case and ended up not finding a whole lot. So, this all hinges on what they can prove and what evidence there actually is. And we've seen reports of what the evidence might be, but not the actual evidence yet. But I don't think, Tony, this is something that is going to impact this year's team, regardless of what evidence comes out. Do you?
No, I don't, because that would be an unprecedented punishment. However, what we're seeing, what is being accused here and alleged here is unprecedented as well. Like, it's bad when there's never even been a punishment thought up for this crime, because nobody thought this crime, NCAA crime, would be committed. So just the time that it takes to come up with a punishment is probably significant. But, it's one of these things where it is, if they have found evidence of cheating, and that's what this would be, this year, then would it be outrageous to punish them for it this year? Like while it's happening, while the head coach is still there? Or do you let him walk after this year? And then we know that the NCAA now doesn't want to punish players in hindsight for stuff that happened while they weren't there, and the guy who did it is gone. So if you do want to punish Jim Harbaugh, like, now would be the time to do it. However, I would be blown away if that happens, because that is the kind of speed at which the NCAA has never, ever, ever moved, unless you had too many pages in your media guide or too much cream cheese at your breakfast table.
I'm sure the 2012 Ohio State football team will be delighted to hear that the NCAA is no longer interested in punishing people for crimes committed or violations committed before they got to campus. I'm sure that will be tremendous relief to them. The other thing that kind of complicates this punishment is the other investigation that's going on right now, where Harbaugh served a 3-game school-imposed suspension. Sherrod Moore served a 1-game school-imposed suspension. So, there is something there, and it is more than just hamburgers, no matter what you may have read online. So there's that, and that investigation is still open. So now you have potentially another investigation that, the fact that there is one open investigation, now another one. There are 3 levels of punishment with the NCAA. Level 3, which is the lowest, and that's the real minor stuff that, too much cream cheese or whatever. Level 2 is more serious. Level 1 is the most serious. The allegations against Harbaugh for the previous case were considered level 1 allegations. These could potentially rise to the level of level 1 allegations as well, especially given the other open investigation. You're not technically on probation, because that's actually a thing that the NCAA says. You're not on probation yet because they haven't resolved the first case yet. But if you have one case open, and then there's another case that opens up that's also, considered serious, it is viewed as more serious because of the other open investigation that, hey, we're already talking to you about this and now you're doing that. That's sort of how the NCAA works. I mean, this is way too early to ask, but I feel like I need to ask one more question. So I'm going to ask it, Tony. What is your guess as to what happens here? Because it feels to me like sometime in 2024, current San Diego Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh finds out that he has a show cause from the NCAA for a few years and kind of goes, I don't know. Pete Carroll said I should do this, so you kind of beat the posse out of town. Again, if this is all proven, this sort of feels like where that could be headed.
We've talked about Jim Harbaugh leaving even before there was this, just leaving with all of his players, basically, who are going to be headed to the NFL, and how this would be the time to leave. Now it's, especially if this all comes to pass, the time to leave. And I do think that this is going to be it for him. Kind of felt that way, leaning that way before this, and now this. Especially if the NCAA definitely hits them, but like you said, I think he's probably gone before that. That's why I wonder what happens to them afterwards, because I do expect Michigan to be hit for this, but I don't think the NCAA is going to get Jim Harbaugh, because I do think he will leave after this year. And whether he was on the fence about it or not, I don't think he's on the fence any longer. And this is something that will chase a lot of guys to the NFL. However, he's the only guy I've ever heard who has been, connected to this in terms of head coaching. So I wonder how other head coaches would have handled it. But this, so far, Jim Harbaugh is the only one that we've ever seen connected, possibly, allegedly, to something like this. But yeah, I think he's leaving one way or the other, and I don't think things will move quickly enough for Michigan to send him packing. You'd be more surprised if Michigan fires him than if he just leaves, right?
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if Michigan fires him, because I think you have to let the investigation play out. And I mean, I feel like we need to keep saying this over and over and over again, because you have to let the investigation play out. Just because it says this on ESPN doesn't mean this is a proven fact. Just because it says this is what the video shows doesn't mean that's a proven fact. But if it is borne out, and this is not from Joe Blow's blog. This is from, Pete Thamel and Dan Wetzel and Ross Dellinger. These are respected national writers who are pretty well sourced and are not interested in screwing around and throwing out unsubstantiated stuff. So the source on here makes me think there's probably something there to the point that we're talking about this and it's worth a conversation. I think one thing we need to talk about and why we're talking about Jim Harbaugh and, that's the name we're throwing out here in connection with, okay, you assume the Stallion stuff is if it sticks to Stallions, why are we talking about Jim Harbaugh and why are we just assuming NCAA bylaw 11.1.1.1 states that a head coach is, quote, presumed to be responsible for the actions of all institutional staff members who report directly or indirectly to the head coach. And it is the head coach's responsibility to, quote, monitor the activities of all institutional staff members involved with the program who report directly or indirectly to the coach. So, that's why, we're not just throwing out Jim Harbaugh's name and saying, he's a guy I've heard of. There's a direct NCAA bylaw that makes him responsible for the actions. And you can't do the what's a moida thing. That doesn't really fly if you have someone on your staff who is directly violating the rules, as it is alleged. In this case, we will let the whole system play itself out. But oh boy, it is for an undefeated team, Tony, that just beat its in-state rival by 100 trillion points, and also watch them put Hitler on the scoreboard. It is somehow a tumultuous week in Ann Arbor. Boy, the state of Michigan having a season in the college football world. Oh boy! If you'd like to hear more about that game and the college football playoff implications of that game and Big Ten championship implications of all that stuff, Tony and I are also recording an episode of the Michigan Monday podcast for the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed today. So you'll be able to hear all of that. We wanted to kind of silo this stuff off because that, we tend to talk about, on-field stuff there with the Michigan Monday podcast, what Michigan did, what it means for the Ohio State Michigan game, what it means for the Big Ten championship chase, and much more. So we'll have that sort of silo that conversation off on that show. But there's enough interesting developments. We wanted to have this one as well. So if you want to have other conversations with us, you can do that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We are both part of the team covering the Ohio State Buckeyes, along with Kevin Noon. We got Mark Givler very busy on the recruiting beat this week. We're going to try and have Mark on. That's probably at this point going to just be a bonus episode of the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast. I was planning on having that be the episode for today, and then this all happened. So we're talking to Mark a little later on. We'll drop that. Very busy recruiting time for the Buckeyes. A very, very busy recruiting weekend during the Penn State game. Brought a lot of visitors in for that. Going to be some potentially some news coming out of that week soon-ish. We'll see how that goes, but we'll talk to Mark about that on an episode this week. And then, of course, we'll have Ross Fulton on, our X's and O's guru. We've got a bunch of those guys all on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. There to make you a smarter football fan, help you understand what you're seeing, what you might not be noticing while you're watching the game. That is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.